Hi guys, welcome to today's lesson. Today we are continuing on with our trigonometry. We are going to be using the last two videos and kind of piecing them together to now find the sides of a right angled triangle. I will try and stick with the mainstream questions, easy questions, and then there'll be another lesson next when we have a denominator. We might look at one question on that. We'll see how we go. Okay, first of all, let's do some review. Think about the things I asked you to learn last lesson. I asked you to learn the ratios, the rules. So that means the so, ka, toa. Making sure, of course, that you know that sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse, that cos theta, of course, is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan theta is opposite over adjacent. That was the number one thing. If you don't know your rules there, okay, don't rely upon the worksheet or the formula sheet, try and learn them. Number two, I wanted you to label sides as opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. Now, usually I ask you to label just two of them. So for example, you have a triangle like this that might be 60 degrees. You might have this as X and this is 10 centimeters. Can you label those sides that are given? Well, we have the opposite side to the 60 degrees. We have the hypotenuse side. Now be careful, because if I change that 60 and move the 60 to the top part of that triangle, then the opposite side would then now be the adjacent side. So you've got to be a little bit careful. Number three, I then wanted you to apply the rule. Okay, so that means, actually I should say, instead of apply the rule, select the rule, shouldn't I say? Select the rule or the ratio for that. Now in this particular instance, of course, what ratio uses opposite and hypotenuse? Well, hopefully you look at that and say, the first one does, the sine ratio does. So I'd say sine theta equals my opposite over hypotenuse. And the last thing I asked you to do from last lesson was to apply the rule. I didn't ask you to solve it, but apply it. So I mean, in this case, sine 60 equals my opposite over my hypotenuse. So that's the part that we went through last lesson. Okay, so we learned how to do that. So again, you need to know your rules, your ratios, soka, toa. You need to be able to label adjacent, hypotenuse, or opposite, and then you need to be able to select the correct rule and sub into it. Now, that's where we're at. The other thing we did last lesson, although we didn't do it like this, we also in that second video looked at some calculations. Now, we've got an equation here, and the next step for today's lesson is, how do I go about solving that? Well, hopefully you might think about this as just a normal algebraic equation, right? What if you had a over 2 equals 10? How would you solve that equation? Well, you would just times by 2, would you not? And say a equals 20. It's the exact same thing here. There's no difference except for the fact that you have some slightly harder numbers, right? You have this divided by 10. I want to get rid of that. The opposite is times by 10. So I take it to the left-hand side and I times it. So x equals 10 times sine 60, or simply just x equals 10 sine 60. Doesn't really matter if you have the times in there. And now all I'm going to do, because we did that last lesson, that last part, we got our calculator out, okay, and I simply typed in 10, I typed in sine, I typed in 60, no need to close the brackets, I press equals, and we come up with an answer of 8.66. That would be to 2 decimal places, or in fact, that could also be told as 3 significant figures. And that's it. That's like the last step is actually really straightforward. You've actually done all the hard work. So today is not really that hard. It's just taking some of the triangles, figuring out which rule you have, and then solving it. Okay, there are a couple of harder questions that come down the track, but today hopefully won't be those. Now, let's have a look. I'm going to slightly modify this last question here. I'm going to make that one an X. I'm going to slightly modify this one. I'm going to make this one an X as well. Otherwise, there's no unknowns to find. Okay, so 3 questions. So for each of these, this is what I would like you to do. You can pause in just a moment. I want you to label the triangle. I want you to find the rule. I want you to apply the rule. I want you to solve. So that's what I want you to do for each of these questions. Please press pause, have a go at the 3 questions and see how you go. Let's say to 1 decimal place for all of these questions. 1 decimal place for our rounding. Okay, good luck. How'd you go? Okay, so first of all, my first question here, I'm going to choose a different color. Let's choose, let's go nice orange color. Okay. All right. So in regards to 50 degrees, what are the 2 sides? I'm going to label it. We have the adjacent side and we have the hypotenuse. I might just above this write SOHCAHTOA, so I've got them all there. So which rule uses adjacent and hypotenuse? Well, hopefully you're screaming at me saying it's the cosine rule, or cos. So we can write cos theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. No, you don't need to write that down. If you want to sub straight into it, go for it. But I'm going to now sub into it. Cos 50 degrees equals my adjacent, which is x, over my hypotenuse is 10. Now, I've labeled, I've found the rule, I've applied the rule. We now need to solve. So what's the opposite of divided by 10? Well, that's going to be times by 10. So x equals 10 times cos 50 degrees. X equals, I now go to my calculator and type in 10 times, or you can just write in 10 cos if you want, 50. I'm going to press equals. Now I said 1 decimal place, so 6.42 would just be 6.4. I'm going to finish off with centimeters. Now, some of the questions boys might ask me is, how much working do I need to show? I would obviously have to have my answer there, and I want to see my rule with the value substituted into it. That is my minimum, okay? If you want to have the other stuff, you know, by all means, I say, if it's good enough for me, it should be good enough for you. But as a minimum, they're the 2 pieces that I expect to see. I must see those 2 lines every single time. You get 1 mark there, okay, for getting the rule, and then you get your answer mark down here. Okay, how'd you go for question 2? So question 2, in regards to the 60 degrees, we have the opposite side in addition to the hypotenuse side. Okay, so O and H, that looks to be sine. So I'm going to write down sine theta equals my opposite over my hypotenuse. Again, you don't really need to write that down. If you want to substrate into it, go for it. Sine 60 degrees equals my opposite side over my hypotenuse. Okay, so I've labeled it, I've found the rule, and I've applied the rule. We now want to solve the question. The opposite of divided by 10 is now times by 10. So x equals 10 times sine 60 degrees. X equals, okay, so I'm going to type in 10. I'm going to type in sine and 60. Press equals. I get 8.66. I said 1 decimal place. ... So x equals 8.7, and it's centimeters. Again, for my minimum amount of working, I want my answer, and I want the version of the rule with the subbed in value, okay, as a bare minimum. The other ones, again, good enough for me, should be good enough for you anyway. It's a really good thing, gents, when you start this off the first time, more working out, the better it is, because you start writing out the rules and you start remembering the rules, which is really significant. The last one, I mean, if I'm a betting man, I'm not, but if I was, cos, sine, probably going to be 10. Let's have a look. We have the 60 degrees, the x is the opposite side to the 60, and the 15 is the adjacent. And look at that, it's O and A, which happens to be 10. We were right. Don't always assume. So this I'm going to write tan 60 equals my opposite over my adjacent. So this time I'm subbing straight into the rule. That's what I would probably expect at some point for you guys to have. Okay, I'm now going to solve it. The opposite of divided by 15 is times by 15. So I'm going to have 15 times tan 60. You can write down 15 tan 60 if you wish. Okay, up to you what you do. I'm going to press times on my one this time. Times tan 60. I'm going to press equals, and I come up with x is equal to 25.980 ... So to 1 decimal place, that would be 26.0, and this happens to be meters. Again, they're the 2 lines that I would expect as a very bare minimum to see. How are you going? I hope that kind of makes sense. At the moment, they are pretty much the standard kind of questions you're going to get. There is one harder question which I will do next lesson. The only difference would be if, for example, question 3 here, the x and the 15 were reversed. And the only difference that has would be your first line would be 1060 equals 15 on x. And I wonder whether you can see why that's more challenging, but that's more for next time. Have a wonderful day, gents. I hope you're enjoying your time down there. Please shoot out a message on Canvas if you're struggling, or if you need some extra assistance, or you need some more challenging work. Have a wonderful day.